Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss about third event of sexual reproduction, and that is post-fertilization events. Post-fertilization event means after the process of fertilization is complete, zygote is formed, then what happens to this zygote? Okay, what are the different changes which zygote undergoes after the process of fertilization? Okay, now we know that after the process of fertilization is completed, a single cell diploid structure called zygote is formed, isn't it? Now, the fate of this zygote is actually completely different in different type of living organism. It depends on the life of, it actually depends on the life cycle of organism, that how this zygote is going to develop in future. Okay. Now in lower end organisms like fungus and algae, okay, there are certain lower organisms like fungus and algae. In them what happens, this zygote actually develops a thick wall around them. Okay, it actually forms a kind of cyst around them, and this process of formation of cyst around them is known as encystation. Okay, this cyst is formed because this zygote actually now starts acting like a spore. Okay, and it forms a cyst around it. This is actually a protective cyst which prevents this zygote from desiccation and damage. Desiccation means loss of water. Okay, so it actually prevents this zygote or spore from desiccation and damage. Okay, and it undergoes the period of rest. That means it undergoes the dormant stage. Okay, dormant stage. Okay, now what happens is, until and unless, okay, no favorable condition arise, this spore or this zygote, which is like, you know, enclosed within the cyst, will not actually germinate. It will not give rise to new organism. Okay, so when favorable conditions arise, the zygote germinates and starts developing into a new fungus or new algae. Okay, and then next is in grade 11th, you have already studied in plant kingdom chapter about three types of life cycles of plants: haplontic, diplontic, and haplodiplontic. Okay, now you're already aware that in case of haplontic, life cycle, the main form is actually haploid. Throughout the life cycle, the major form or the majority of the life cycle is actually haploid. In between the life cycle, only a diploid zygote is produced for a shorter period of time. Okay, so that is haplontic life cycle, in which throughout the life cycle, the main organ or main organism is actually haploid. Okay, so in such organisms which have haplontic life cycle, okay, like algae, okay, and you should remember the name of this algae. Example, this is very important for NEET. Okay, so you should remember this. Example like Volvox, Chlamydomonas, and Spirogyra. So these three algae, they actually show haplontic life cycle. Okay, so in them, the zygote divides by meiosis to produce haploid spores, and these haploid spores further develops into haploid individuals. Okay, so remember zygote is there. This zygote is actually diploid. Okay, and now this zygote divides by the process of meiosis. Okay, and produces haploid spores. Okay, so remember in haplontic life cycle in the organism, throughout the life cycle, the major form is haploid. Only in between life cycle, for a certain period of time, diploid zygote is produced. The majority form is of haploid. Okay, and in these organisms, the diploid zygote divides, undergoes meiosis, and produces haploid spores, which further develops into haploid individuals. In other type of organisms which actually poses diplontic life cycle, okay, diplontic life cycle, and the example is like, you know, angiosperms, higher animals, angiosperms, gymnosperms, fucus. Okay, so in them actually the zygote divides repeatedly by mitotic division to form a multicellular body called embryo, and later on this embryo will actually develop into seed. Okay, so this embryo is also developed, is actually also diploid. Okay, so in diplontic life cycle, where actually, you know, the main form is diploid, and only for a very short period of time, haploid gametes are produced. Okay, otherwise throughout the life cycle, the majority or the main form, or throughout the life cycle, the organism actually stays in the form of diploid cell. Okay, the organism remains diploid throughout the life cycle, but only for a particular period of time, gametes are produced. Okay, and these gametes are haploid, and these gametes actually fuse and they produce diploid zygote. Okay, and this diploid zygote undergoes mitotic division to form a multicellular organism called, or multicellular, actually multicellular body, which is called embryo. Okay, and this embryo is also diploid, and this embryo further divides and develops into seed. Then we have third type of life cycle, which is called haplodiplontic life cycle. In haplodiplontic life cycle, throughout the life cycle, for half period of time, or for half period of life cycle, the organism stays haploid, and for another half of the life cycle, the organism stays diploid. Okay, so in haplodiplontic life cycle, the zygote usually undergoes mitosis. Okay, because zygote, every time zygote is diploid. Okay, so zygote here undergoes mitosis and gives rise to diploid sporophyte. Okay, and then the spore mother cells which are present in sporophytes, they undergoes meiosis to produce haploid spores. Okay, and this haploid spores then gives rise to gametophyte, which then produces gametes, and these gametes are also haploids. Okay, you must remember this haplodiplontic life cycle from grade 11. If you remember this, you must have studied there are two phases mainly, sporophyte or sporophytic phase and gametophyte. Okay, this is diploid phase, and this gametophyte is also actually diploid phase. Sporophytes, they produce spores. These spores are actually haploid. Okay, which produces gametophyte, and gametophyte again produces gametes. Gametes are actually haploid. Gametes fuse and they produce zygote. Zygote is diploid, and zygote again, develops and produces sporophyte, and inside sporophyte, the spore producing cells, okay, the spore mother cells, they undergo meiosis and they produces haploid spores. And the organism in which haplodiplontic life cycle is observed is bryophytes and pteridophytes. Okay, so in them the zygote undergoes mitosis, gives rise to diploid sporophyte, which undergoes meiosis and produces haploid spores. Now, second very important process in post-fertilization event is embryogenesis. Okay, embryogenesis is actually the process of development of embryo from zygote. After the process of fertilization, zygote is produced. Okay, this zygote is actually diploid. Now, this zygote is single-celled structure, and it now undergoes the process of embryogenesis and produces a ball of cell. Okay, this ball of cell, and all cells in this ball are actually diploid. Okay, they are diploid, and this ball of cell is actually known as embryo. Okay, now this process is known as embryogenesis. Now remember, during embryogenesis, the zygote undergoes two very important processes: cell division and cell differentiation. Okay, cell division we are already aware, because here the zygote is diploid, and after embryogenesis, all the cells of embryo are also diploid. So here the cell division which took place was mitosis. Okay, in mitosis, the cell divides, and all the daughter cells, they also have the equal number of chromosomes like parent cell. Okay, so here a zygote divides mitotically, and the number of cells in embryo increases. Okay, second very important process is of cell differentiation. Now this is important because cell differentiation is a process by which cells, they become specialized to perform a specific function. Now here embryo is there. Okay, now in this embryo there might be a certain group of cell which are responsible for production of limb of the baby, maybe. Okay, there are some cells of the embryo which will lead to the development of brain of the baby. Okay, there are some cells of the embryo which might lead to the development of digestive system of the baby. Okay, some other group of cells of the embryo which might lead to the development of maybe reproductive organs of the baby. Okay, so this is called cell differentiation, in which the cells, they become specialized to become a specific function. Okay, So group of cells in embryo undergo certain modifications, certain changes to form specialized tissues and organs to form a particular organism. So this process is called cell differentiation. Next is oviparous and viviparous animals. Oviparous animals, we have studied about this already in the lower grades. Oviparous animals are those which actually lay fertilized or unfertilized eggs. Okay, these oviparous animals actually do not give birth to the young ones. They do not give birth directly to the young ones. Instead, they lay eggs. Okay. Now they might lay fertilized or unfertilized eggs. But viviparous animals, they give birth to the young ones directly. Okay. And then oviparous, in them, zygote develops outside the female body because obviously egg is laid outside the body. So in that egg, a zygote is being developed. Okay. And in case of viviparous organisms, the zygote develops inside the female body. Okay, and then in oviparous, embryo gets all nutrition from the yolk. Okay, embryo gets all nutrition from the yolk, and in case of viviparous, embryo gets all nutrition from the mother's body. Those who consume egg, you must have seen in egg there are two parts, egg white, and in center we have egg yolk. So this yellow part of the egg, which is called yolk, is very important because from this yolk the developing embryo acquires nourishment. Okay, and in case of viviparous organism, as the baby is developing inside the mother's body, like in case of human beings, when the female is pregnant, the baby or the fetus is developing inside the mother's body. So this fetus obtains all its nutrients from the mother's body itself. Okay, in case of oviparous organisms, the chances of survival of egg is actually very less, as it is vulnerable to predators always. Okay, predators like snakes and all, or rat, they might come and consume the eggs of these oviparous animals. Okay, but in case of viviparous animals, the chances of survival is always very high, as these females, they deliver young ones after attaining a certain age. Okay, example of oviparous is birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians like frogs, salamanders. Okay, an example of viviparous is mammals. The best example is mammals. These are the pictures which shows oviparous and viviparous animals. You can see here these birds are oviparous, they're laying egg. Snakes, that is reptiles, are also oviparous. Okay, here it is viviparous animals. This tiger is viviparous. Tigers is sitting here with its cubs. Okay, this is a newborn human baby. Okay, this is also viviparous animals. Now embryogenesis in plants. In plants, zygote is formed inside the ovules. Now we know that if you look at this plant structure, okay, the stigma, style, and ovary. Okay, stigma, style, and ovary. The inside ovary, we know there is ovule. Okay, and inside ovary, egg or female gamete is produced. Okay, so this egg gets fertilized, and after fertilization, zygote is also present inside the ovule. Okay, and this zygote actually changes into embryo. So from this egg, zygote is produced after fertilization, and the zygote undergoes embryogenesis and produces embryo. Okay, now after this entire process of embryogenesis, what happens? This ovule actually changes into seed. Okay, ovule changes into seed and ovary changes into fruit. Okay, in detail you will learn in chapter number 2 that in this ovary, ovule is present. Inside ovule you have this egg or female gamete, and this ovule is actually surrounded by a layer which is called integuments. Okay, this layer is actually known as integuments. Okay, so this ovule gives rise to seed. Integuments gives rise to seed coat. Okay, what it forms? It forms actually seed coat. For example, if you when you eat almonds, okay, so almonds are actually you soak almonds in water maybe overnight, and next morning you can remove the peel of the almond, isn't it? So that peel is actually seed coat. Okay, and and what happens to after complete process of fertilization and when the seed and fruits are developed, what happens to the style and stigma? They wither off and they fall off. Okay, they wither and fall off. Okay, they become actually dry, and then they the dry, that means they wither off and they fall from the plant. Okay, and sepals which are present just below the flower, petals, stigma and style, they wither off and fall from the plant, and even sepals also fall. There are actually certain plants in them sepal remains attached. You must have seen all vegetables, for example, tomatoes. So you must have seen on the top of tomato fruit, like, where there is a small stem, small leaf-like structure. Okay, these leaf-like structure are actually sepals. Okay, so in some fruits or in some plants, sepals remain attached, and in some plants, sepals also wither off and fall. Okay, so this next picture actually just shows the diagrammatic representation of whatever I have explained earlier. Okay, these are actually your ovules, which changes into seed, ovary changes into fruit. Okay, this petal, okay, stigma, style, they all wither and fall off. The sepal also wither off and fall, and only in certain plants it remains. Okay, and the integuments, it's not mentioned here. The integument layer, that changes into seed coat. So we are done with events of sexual reproduction, and we have completed this chapter number 1, that is reproduction in organisms.